Mark Pruitt. Mark, best part of your summer.
The best part of my summer, I guess, was holy moly, spending some time at the beach, and I took my youngest to drop off at the University of South Carolina. So I am just Terry and I at home now.
Oh, I'm in the same space.
That's great, you know.
Yeah, all right.
Goes both ways.
Senator Sokola, since I know you're going to have to jump off, would you like to share your best part of the summer with us?
Sure. I had the privilege of attending a leadership summit in Normandy.
Oh, wow.
I got to go to Utah Beach, Point the Hawk, Omaha Beach, the cemetery. It was a very profound week, and I will always value the things I learned there, and I hope I get a chance to share a lot of what I learned there. It was really a compelling experience.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I mean, mine's not going to be as profound, to be quite honest with you. Mine's going to be a little bit more in the Mark Pruitt category. It was a summer where I was looking ahead to no high schooler. Like, that was it. I have all there. There is an element of not having to worry about high school. Granted, moving the last one off to college of the 4 and the other one's getting out the door was its own challenge. But for me, the best part of the summer was a summer without high school and just kind of being with, college age kids getting ready to start their next chapters in various forms. Evelyn?
My brother lives in Texas, and I only get to see him and my niece and nephew maybe once or twice a year, and usually it's every summer. I haven't seen them in 2 years, so they came this summer, and it was the best part of the summer. I had so much fun seeing them. They're all taller than I am now, but it was great to see them.
Great. Terry, I don't know if you can see the screen, but we're just kind of reconnecting really quickly with what was the best part of your summer. If you want to quick share what you have, how you would respond to that. All right, Matt, then.
I guess it would probably be on topic if I said the General Assembly's funding of the Reading Consortium's recommendations.
Oh,
I'll do a variation on a couple of the earlier ones. We have 2 current high schoolers, so having a 3-month respite from the issues associated with that was nice.
Great, that's good. See, Haley and Jason, you're part of the team. So Jason, what was your best part of the summer?
I think fewer meetings. Yeah. Having more time to work was definitely helpful.
All right, I see Haley putting up celebration signs. Haley, why don't you share with us what was the best part of your summer?
Hi, everyone. The best part of my summer was in early June. I moved to Lewis Beach in Delaware. So from Wilmington to Lewis. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, awesome. Good for you.
Yeah,
Dawn, we're just kind of quick. What was the best part of your summer?
Ooh, well, spending a lot of time at the beach, part 1, and part 2, working on a preschool playground grant. We're getting a new playground. I know you know that, Jeff, but not everybody else does. So yeah. It was really exciting to work on that grant this summer, and it's really happening in about a month. So we're very excited.
Great. All right, and we'll circle back to Terry if she's listening. What was the best part of your summer? All right. Jason, do we have a quorum present right now? Because I have a bad feeling we're not going to get a quorum by the end of this. And we had Senator Sokola, and we had to vote on anything. I would want to move it up.
No, we've got 7.
All right. Oh well. Jason, you want to just kind of move into this next slide? I think it was great. It's great to reconnect. I want to keep this meeting more pointed on just like high level topics, path forward, kind of regrouping and reorienting. It's, I know Ray is not able to be with us this afternoon. She because of Labor Day holiday on a Monday, it bumped her regularly scheduled Monday evening meetings on the first Monday to today. It was the Wilmington Commission of Education and Equity is having an event tonight, and she's hosting that. Actually, she runs it, so she had to go to that. So we are going to reconnect, refocus, and regroup. Next slide, we can kind of dispense with that. I think we're in good shape. Roll call vote. Jason, can you do attendance right from this, or do we need to put our names in the chat?
No, I have attendance marked. You're good.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next slide. So the refocus part is really kind of letting Matt talk about his favorite part of the summer, which is the status, the report, and the status of the recommendations, kind of where we are, and then we'll kind of move forward from the recommendations to Reading, to our focus, to our priorities, and then we'll go from there. So Matt, the floor is yours.
Great. I'll try to use the time efficiently. And before he has to jump off, first thank Senator Scola for the role that he played in helping to make sure that these recommendations were funded. And it was very helpful to have him and other members of the General Assembly, but him in particular because of his background in this issue, being supportive, because he was there at the table when they were developed. So he was able to speak knowledgeably to them. So $10 million total was appropriated by the General Assembly to fund the recommendations that we had made in December. And the original scope of our recommendations was probably closer to 20, but 10 million by any measure was really an extraordinarily good outcome. Some of that funding is in the form of directly in the operating budget, about $3 million, and then another 7 million of it is in what's called one-time funding that is going to be allocated by the Controller's Office and the Office of Management and Budget. So, one of our priorities for next year will be trying to make sure that that one-time money becomes part of the ongoing operating budget to ensure that these programs that were funded are able to be maintained in out years. So you may remember 3 of the recommendations that we had made were for programs that would require the state to issue RFPs. And they were all issued. They've all been issued. And the epilogue language from the budget had some very ambitious deadlines for issuing the RFPs and for the responses to them. And the Department of Education was very cooperative with us in the sense that we asked if we could look at drafts of the RFPs before they went out to make sure that they were consistent with our recommendations and with the legislature's language from the epilogue. And they allowed us to do that. And when we had suggestions for them, took our suggestions and implemented most of them. So it was a good process with DOE. So the pre-K RFP was the first one to go out on August 1st, and the responses to that are due on September 15th. And that's the one for which the money was put directly into the operating budget. So there's no issue there about funding being maintained in future years. We won't know until September 15th how the response was, because the main concern there is, and I particularly found this as I was calling around to a few places to try to make sure that we had a good pool of applicants. One of the challenges, and Dawn could probably speak to this, is just physical space. There are some organizations and a couple of school districts that were interested in the funding, but just literally did not have the physical space on such short notice to be able to place new programs. So that's a problem. Hopefully, that knowing that this program is going to be ongoing, that we will be able to, people will be able to, more bidders will be able to bid in out years. The other challenge with that program is providing notice to eligible families, because you may remember we wanted this to be targeted at households who had 3 and 4-year-olds who were in feeder patterns for the elementary schools that had the highest percentages of kids living under the poverty line. And that process is going on now. It's a cooperative effort between DHSS and the Department of Education. And my understanding is that it's going well. So we won't know until they push the button and try to send the notices out. But my understanding is that they are on track to have eligible families get notified in a timely way. The other two RFPs are for the wraparound services. That RFP is out. It's the responses are due October 1st, and there are 3 schools that will receive grants. It's a total of $4.5 million. It's not required that the grants be equal, but the RFP says that $1.5 million per school is probably the ballpark of what's going to be awarded. And you may remember that one is based upon the percentage. It's elementary school focused on the percentage of kids in the school identified by DOE as low income. So I think there are either 9 or 10 schools that qualify based on percentages of kids under the poverty line in the school. 1 school from Brandywine, a few each from Red Clay and Christina, and the remaining schools are charter schools in the city of Wilmington. So 3 grants, 9 or 10 applicable, 9 or 10 eligible schools. So the DOE will have an in-house bid team that'll decide who's responsive. But that RFP mirrors very closely what we said in our recommendations we wanted to see in programs like that. And then the third is the professional development that the education work group had recommended, and that RFP is also out. One slight change with that is that DOE asked us if they could combine that RFP with an RFP that they were already putting out for professional development on a broader level that wasn't necessarily targeted at schools with high percentages of low-income children. And we said that was fine as long as the ones that they awarded with the money that was allocated for Reading were focused on those schools and had the program components that we had requested. And they do. And it'll actually result in those grants being higher than they would have otherwise been. So all 3 are out, all going at this early stage well. And Senator Lockman just within the last week put in her request to the budget office for allocating the remaining one-time funds. So we will, for things like the database that we had recommended and the money for home visitation programs, all the things that were going to departments other than the Department of Education. Once we get sign off from the budget office, then that money will be released to those departments. And I would expect with DTI that they will put out an RFP to help them set the database up.
Thanks, Matt. Does anybody have any questions for Matt regarding the status of the recommendations in the RFPs that are out the door right now? I do appreciate the update, Matt. And again, I echo your sentiments to Senator Sokola for the work like you said, the original work was 20 million, but 10 million definitely goes a long way to get started with the work and to kind of demonstrate the commitment to the work. I think that's definitely speaks. So the challenge that comes next is once the RFPs go out and the work starts, we're talking about monitoring and gathering data to assess effectiveness and to continue to improve to either improve student achievement or student outcomes, whatever the intent would be of the recommendations that we made. And DSU and UD have been working to draft out kind of I don't want to say a template that can go across all the work groups, but I do think that all work groups have a body of work in front of them that they are going to now be monitoring and collecting data. And so I believe the goal would be somewhere October. No, I said October. Jason was like, well, maybe, but possibly November, where there's going to be, what the recommendation was, how we plan to propose to monitor it, and what data we'll be looking at to assess implementation moving forward. So I know that that's the next step down, and that kind of lands on Ray's, my and Matt's desk, and to kind of like put those high level pieces in place using the work that we've done thus far to build the recommendations. And then for this group, Tizzy, Matt, and Ray and I met in June I feel like twice, maybe, Matt. I feel like we met at least twice to kind of talk about what the consortium leadership felt was the next like path forward for the social determinants work group. If you all recall, we hit the ground running as a group. We were the newest group on the block in July of whatever the year was that we started, and we presented a fair body of recommendations into the budget process with a pretty hefty body of research and knowledge behind those recommendations. So we definitely wanted to take a step back and see what the leadership thought we should be, where our energy should go in the coming months and in the coming year. And from those conversations, we've kind of distilled down some high level thoughts around how we're going to categorize our work. There is going to be this notion of action and monitoring, like seeing it happen and then monitoring it. There's a strong hope and an emphasis to continue with engagement. And that means from all stakeholders engagement. Collaboration. We want to continue to encourage collaboration across divisions, departments, schools and districts. And we want to continue to model that. Sharing, again, this being a place where we can get people to bring forward ideas and share what's out there research-based that's helping support the work. I believe in June we had DSU present the trauma-informed practices activities that they're going to be doing, this cohorts that they're establishing this fall moving forward. And then there was a desire and a recognition that we've spent a lot of energy in the pre-K, early childhood, elementary space, that there was a sentiment to kind of start shifting a look to the secondary level to kind of see what the work looks like at middle school and high school, specifically graduation and seniors and where they're headed. Those are like the broad, what Ray was calling streams of our thinking. And then if you recall in June, Jason, we had a Mentimeter activity where people just kind of typed in their thoughts around what the priorities were. And this was as we were exiting the meeting, this was the upshot, and this will be shared. Is it in the minutes of the meeting, Jason, that we would be approving today, or did you not include it in there?
I did not, but I can attach it as an addendum.
Okay, I think it should be attached as an addendum. So this just gives you an idea of where we were in June, what we thought our priorities should be. So to kind of just back up, we have the high level recommendations. We have the need to monitor and see them through. We have these streams of thought that we're going to maintain staying in the same direction. But then this is where the group thought maybe we should put our priorities and our energy within those frameworks of operating. The goal today was just to kind of reset the room around that, not to have any big presentations, not to have any maybe necessarily aha moments, but just to kind of reorient ourselves and refocus that, those conversations in our work. I'll open the floor up for any questions around the refocusing that's related to any of it, whether it's the recommendations or the kind of high level things I just touched on. So does it make sense? And I'll ask, we have a lot of boots on the ground folks here who are implementers du jour. I mean, they know how to do things. And so, I'll defer to someone in the room. Does this make sense, Evelyn, as a path forward for us based on the conversations we had last year and what you're hearing in terms of the work we need to do?
I mean, I think it pretty much captures the spirit of what we, discussed last year, put into the recommendations, and everything's been approved. So it's going forward with what we have. I think that it makes sense to kind of keep going in the direction that we're going in.
Mark, I know you were at a lot of the meetings last year, and I'm not sure if you were at a couple of the ones where we talked about some of the recommendations. So I definitely want to know, does this make sense from your perspective at a secondary level as well, and as a principal? You're on mute. Mark, unmute yourself.
I'm rusty with Zoom, I could say, after the last few weeks. Yeah, I hadn't heard you're on mute in a few months. I said, I think I maybe missed the last meeting or two, so it's definitely good to hear, a refocus towards high school and graduation and what the students will be doing. But it's certainly something that I think building level folks can get behind.
Okay. Jeff, your thoughts from a completely different lens. I know you sent Kristen a couple times in your place in the spring. You had a lot going on with DSEA. So does this make sense as a path forward?
Yeah, I think it does, Jeff. I mean, we spent a lot of time last year, like you said, focused on, the elementary or the pre-K level, made some fairly comprehensive recommendations that we were able to get some funding for, and Matt just detailed the RFPs. So I think, remaining engaged there and continuing to monitor those recommendations and follow forward while kind of shifting focus to the secondary level makes a lot of sense to me. So I think that's what I heard from you.
Yep.
And the idea of people being able to bring back different programs like the trauma certificate we heard about from DSU, I think is another good learning for all of us.
Thanks. Dawn?
So some of the feedback that I have is related to recommendations that we had made previously, but we didn't focus on them because we were looking at fiscal recommendations. So, and maybe these other recommendations. So when we put forth our early childhood recommendations last year, we talked about some of the recommendations specific to special education, and we didn't have the opportunity to include those in our ask for fiscal year 2022. So I actually, and they are related to some DSEA recommendations. For DSEA, I'm on the executive board, and we, at our last rep assembly, we voted to make early childhood and looking at early childhood special education an area of focus. So we know there are a lot of questions statewide related to equity in early childhood and related to special education. So I'd like the opportunity to share some of that information, not tonight, but to look at when we talk about access, when we talk about the LRE, the environment, and how we provide services in our highest need schools.
You bring up a good point that's more of a broader stake, that we actually had other recommendations that might not have got the attention. So part of maybe this is going back and revisiting some of those from a different perspective moving forward. So I'll make a note of that in my comments here, or in my agenda.
Thank you, Jeff.
So thank you very much. Appreciate that. I don't know, Terry, has she made it into the room yet?
Hi, good evening. I'm sorry, I'm driving. I've been following, and I do believe the path forward sounds appropriate. And if I understood the graphic, then I think it's right on point for us to continue along the lines of equity, health, and with a focus on graduation and 21st century skills. And as much as possible, building in our SEL work into that.
Yeah, you did read the graphic correct, Terry. It's the same. It definitely it will get it out there more in the coming months, I think, because it does set the table nicely. And I do think, and I do hear Dawn's point, there are some things that we don't want to lose sight of, but I think kind of turning our attention to something that we didn't talk about much, which was secondary last year, would be helpful, just to kind of see what's out there and what parents and students think, as well as we have two principals in the room, and I know we have some other administrators who are also in here, that it's time to kind of leverage those relationships as well. Senator Sokola, your thoughts on the path forward?
Second, I gotta leave the meeting.
I think we lost their Senator Sokola.
I lost my mouse ability to
You
unmute
got
myself.
Mark Pruitt-itis, I think it is.
Yeah,
like
that
you
was,
completely forgot how to operate these things, right?
Yeah, it's tough sometimes. We have a lot to do, but I think the main thing we have to do is monitor how we're doing with what we have.
Yeah.
Matt said we requested 20 million, we got 10 million. We gotta show that 10 million is worth it.
Yeah.
And then when we ask for the rest, we'll have a better case to make for the rest.
Yep.
I really think that it's more than money. It's commitment in so many ways. It's about other policies that are beyond the money that relate in many ways, like equity in who is teaching our children, equity in the decisions that districts are making for assignments. And, I just think we have to make more passionate positions around that clear to others. We have some really good people in district positions to make a difference, who believe that's a big part of the solution. So that's kind of where I am.
Thank you. So I think, the plan would be, Ray and I would take the Mentimeter topics, kind of overlay them on top of the engagement, collaboration, sharing, the secondary level. And we would probably cast that net out again to this room like we've done in the past. Of like, hey, who should we bring in? What is it that we need to learn about and hear about, and kind of strike that chord to generate the energy that you're talking about, Senator Skoll. If we're going to add something, it has to have energy and it has to have, passion behind it. And we want to capitalize on some of the folks who you just referenced, because we know they're out there and that they support the work. So I think, this conversation has been helpful. I wish Ray was in the room, because Ray always has a different perspective. Again, I'm a 30-year school district employee. I have a different vision or a view for what, an outcome could be, versus Ray definitely has a different vision and view of how to get to that outcome. And it's always helpful to have her perspective. So I'll definitely be looking forward to bouncing some of these thoughts off of her.
Well, and you indicated that the university was going to have a role in,
Yes.
and maybe we ought to look at what their plan is.
Yeah,
Because you may have a different opinion as to what's really measurable that ought to be the focus. And
right. That's where we spent some time after the June meeting and some back and forth and a few emails and conversations with DSU and UD around what the monitoring tool is going to look like, and what's going to be best suited to kind of measure, to your point, Senator Sokola. Is what we're doing making the difference that we had hoped? Because to your point, we have more work to do and we want to continue to move forward, but you have to have evidence that it's actually having the impact that it was intended to have. So there's not I don't want to say it's like we had a great victory, but we definitely don't want to rush in and do something hastily. We want it to be thoughtful. And I think that's a little bit of what, we're trying to do now, is regroup, kind of be thoughtful about where we're focusing and where we're leveraging, where we're making sure the resources are leveraged. I think, seeing the RFPs go out, it was definitely another victory, Matt, because how, as well, anybody in the room who deals with that knows how that process could go, in terms of getting those written and out. So I think we're definitely on the right path.
This is Matt. This may be getting too much into the weeds for this early, but it might also be worth thinking about, our ability to kind of record what these programs look like once they are up and running, which hopefully will be end of this calendar year, beginning of next calendar year, because, we're not likely given the short period of time between then and, June of next year, to actually see a lot of statistical information.
Right.
And it's also not an environment where we can sort of take people on tours of schools.
Yes. All right.
But I do think that it would be helpful, especially for the legislators, if they could kind of lay eyes on,
Mhm.
okay, here's what, we funded these things. Here's what this after school program looks like.
Yeah.
Here's what this new, high quality pre-K looks like. So I don't know what our ability is staff wise to kind of go in and put something together that, where we could have a 5 or 10 minute long, video type presentation. But I think it'd be really helpful for the legislators to be able to, see what these things look like once they've got their, their
Yeah.
set up and they're running.
Yeah, that's a good point. I put a note in here, Matt, about that.
And I want to recommend looking at other legislation that passed this year. So for example, Inspire. So thinking about ways that we can take the work that we're doing and piggyback on that work. So how do we educate high school students, middle school students, high school students about new opportunities that are available? So there's
Yeah.
a lot happening in Delaware. So for us to think, how do we let freshmen know that this is something you can work towards, that this scholarship could be available for you, in 3 years. So how is that communicated? I don't know, because I'm in the early childhood world.
Yeah.
And
Right.
do all of our schools even know, do all of our high school counselors know that these opportunities are now available since it's new legislation?
Well, I think that there's a definite need there to kind of look at what's out there and how is it getting messaged, because I can tell you, even the best intended efforts go oftentimes unnoticed until the last minute, or sometimes overlooked entirely because there was no effort to publicize it or to communicate it, even though you would think it was logically going to land on a principal's desk. And having been there for a lot of years, that's not always the case. And it's no fault of anyone's. It's how it happens. It's how I think what I take away from where we are, it's a little bit of, I'm trying to resist the urge to do what's always been done, because always been done is like, if you have the money, okay, so then you better use it and spend it, because you always wanted to get more. Like as a principal, right, Mark, you have teacher X. And if teacher X is not teaching 150 kids, teacher X is in jeopardy of not being a teacher in your building because you don't need teacher X. So you have 150 kids in that teacher's schedule, whether they want to be in that schedule or not, because you need to continue to get that resource. Despite the fact that 80 of those kids don't want to be there, drive the teacher crazy, get thrown out, and by October are in a study hall. And so was that resource used wisely, or was it done because there was an opportunity to keep or get funding or money? There's RFPs out there. Like, I think it's important that the group, we continue to critically look at it. I agree with Senator Sokola, like critically look at what it is it's going to, and not hastily move on too quickly because we got the one victory. So Mark, I see you on mute.
I don't think I'm on mute. I think
No,
I've
did you
got
want to
it.
say something?
No. At first I thought you were asking me a question, but I'm just going to agree with you. I'm going to go back on mute and agree with you. I thought you were addressing me to respond, but I totally agree with you.
Evelyn, does that make sense? So the principal in me wants to resist that urge, but I don't know. This is a way higher level than that. And so it's like, you want to make sure that we're thoughtfully doing this. And Matt, I think you bring up a great point, that to capture it is going to look different. Then we're not going to have X versus Y to show numbers of improvement and growth. Like, we're literally going to have to figure out how to tell that narrative in a different fashion. That's what kind of made me think of it, because that would be a different way to kind of demonstrate success early on than most people will say, well, show me the numbers. Well, what do the numbers say? What does the data say? So I think that that's an important perspective to bring, Matt, moving forward. So the next part of the meeting really was to kind of regroup. I think we're going to, Ray and I are looking at attendance of membership last year, and it's really not people who were flitting in and out for various reasons, and we knew they weren't going to be with us because they had other engagements or other commitments, and they send representatives. But there's some folks who we haven't really heard from that we were considering we were going to reach out and ask. First off, Senator Cole, before he left off, brought up a good point. Can you, positive intent, just check and make sure they actually got all the communications you were sending and it wasn't going to their spam. I said, okay, we'll follow up with that. But I think we're looking to probably check our membership in terms of refreshing those who might have other commitments elsewhere. So if anybody has any opinions about how to approach that, I'm all ears, but we do have ways of definitely asking people if they gracefully, we appreciate their commitment, but we, wonder if there's something else that they would rather do with their time, and we would use their seat accordingly on the committee, that kind of thing. I don't know if there's any thoughts around that. Matt, this was we were tapped by Matt Den, if we all remember. So I want to make sure that I'm not ruffling Matt Den's feathers on that one.
You'd be the only person in Delaware with that concern. Now, I used up all my good ideas for membership the first time around.
So know that by the next meeting, we may be presenting new members. I'm not really sure. Ray and I still have to spend some time. Actually, Ray and I are meeting tomorrow to kind of regroup and get ourselves on that path in the same page. Does this Monday work for everybody if we continue to do this Monday for meetings, and/or does the time work or not work? Those are the two big asks, I think. We're one of the unusual groups. Somehow we landed on a 4:30 to 6. I think some of it was capitalizing on people at certain spaces in time and being able to get on at 4:30, and 6 being just dinner time versus the 5 to 6:30 time that I think some other groups have. I think Jason will probably do a quick survey of folks in the near future, but I wanted to get a sense of the room if this would work. And then before I let Secretary Bunting say a few words, we're going to issue a challenge, another homework assignment for the next meeting. And I don't know how this is going to go. It'll be fascinating. We would like to have more parents and students involved in these discussions. So the goal would be for everyone to bring at least one of the other, either a student or a parent who you feel would contribute to this or might have an interest in joining the meetings on a regular basis and joining in on the conversations, or being someone to be involved. It's kind of like that old honor roll speech that you did as a principal. Hey, everybody, it's awesome that you're here, but you know what? At the next meeting, I want you to bring a friend. So, so I'm going to encourage the folks in this room to bring a friend, but that friend to be a parent or a student, which I recognize could be a challenge for some of the folks, myself included, although I have an unlimited supply of students. Jeff, I know that would be a little bit of a challenge for you, some of the other folks. So I think that's going to be the challenge we put out there.
I'm going to ask one of Matt's kids to come with me.
I think one of them already came home from school today and proudly announced that he didn't have any homework, and I think he can hear me, and I think he physically recoiled when Jeff mentioned a homework assignment.
So that's I think what the challenge we're going to put out, just because I do believe that if this work is going to continue, it is time to bring their voices to the table in some way, shape, or form, and this could be an opportunity for us to learn from them. That said, that's really the docket for the day. Secretary Bunting, we can't do the minutes, can we, Jason? We don't have a quorum, correct? All right. Jason always likes to move the minutes around for approval just in case we have a quorum. But Secretary Bunting, do you have any thoughts or words about what you're seeing and hearing about the work that this group has or across the state?
No, and I apologize. I didn't know you were meeting today until one of my crew said, here's some information you can take to the meeting this afternoon. So I got a quick email to Matt. So I apologize. And as soon as I got on, the governor's office called. So I do find the conversation of this group really interesting. And of course, Dawn and I have had a lot of conversation about the preschool piece, which is a growing phenomenon right now. So I know a lot of good things are going to happen with the social determinants piece and what we're doing in the social and emotional learning and behavioral health arena. So a lot of good work and good opportunity lies ahead of this group, I think.
Agreed. I do agree that it is. And unfortunately, COVID makes the work more challenging, but it does create the space to think differently about the challenges in front of us. And I think that's one thing that this group, I appreciate the conversations that we have every month. We have a really interesting group of individuals who come to the table with very unique perspectives, all focused on heading in the same direction. So that is one thing. It's been a pleasure to be the co-chair of this group with Ray. So I hope we're up to that challenge, Secretary Bunting, and I look forward to good conversations and continued positive outcomes. So,
Jeff, if I can just add one thing real quick. I had mentioned this before Secretary Bunting was on, but I wanted to make sure that she heard it as well, that we were just very grateful for how responsive her department was and how responsive she personally has been in terms of making sure that these RFPs were what they ought to be and went out on time. And her folks have really been, and again, she personally has been very responsive and very helpful over the last month or so.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, that way, and it was Secretary Bunting. It was genuine, just to be clear, when he brought it up the first time. He wasn't just saying it, hoping you popped into the room. It was genuine, and Senator Sokola echoed the same sentiments in terms of moving forward, not specifically citing DOE, but just the energy around this and the hope to continue the work. So, and I commented that RFP process isn't always easy, and to get it the where you all got it and get it out the door that quickly, actually super commendable. And I think
We're here to support.
Kids will benefit from it in the long run. So I agree, Matt. That said, I'm not going to keep people for the sake of Jeff Menzer needing to be a co-chair. It's 5:12 on a summer-like afternoon. I'm going to just look for somebody to raise a hand, so motion to adjourn the meeting, and then we will just move on. There we go, Mark, in a second. And I see a head nod. Good enough. All right, all. Thank you very much, and be on the lookout for updates and minutes in the next couple of weeks. Take care.
Thank you.
So Jason, when you stop